Sam, it would be a great help to me if, not that I'm asking you to help me.
There was a wrong opening.
That
if
was
it's a
a
great
wrong-
help to you, I will never do it.
Why would I help you? So people are asking frequently about the relationship between narcissism and Asperger syndrome. And I consistently say I don't know. The person to ask is
But I watched a video of yours about this.
And in that video I said I'm not sure. That was one of my early videos when we first
It
started.
wasn't bad
talking.
by half. It was
Oh,
good.
thank you. Well, in that video I think I was saying I don't really know what it is, but you know a lot, way more than I do about Asperger syndrome and about narcissism. Do you think there is a connection between?
Well, first of all, Asperger's syndrome has been removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual,
Right.
edition 5, 2013. Okay. They decided to remove it because they decided that, how to put it gently, it doesn't exist as a clinical entity.
Okay.
They thought that it was part of a spectrum of autism disorders, and the need to demarcate it as a separate disorder is absolutely unnecessary.
Okay.
By the way, the doctor who invented or discovered, or whatever it is, Asperger's syndrome was a Viennese doctor,
Right.
who was an ardent Nazi.
Really?
Really. Which would explain why he discovered Asperger. So perhaps it's better to, in order to be au courant, to be updated, maybe it's better to talk about autism spectrum disorders.
Sure.
So the problem is that phenomenologically, in other words, when we observe a patient with autism, a high-functioning autism, which used to be called Asperger, when we observe a high-functioning autist and when we observe a narcissist, especially in social interactions, they appear to be identical. Consequently, many therapists confuse the two or conflate the two, misdiagnose narcissism as Asperger, as autism, and autism as narcissism. And so it goes both ways. Let's start with the basic fact that autists have empathy of all kinds, including emotional, actually pronouncedly emotional.
Okay.
They're very emotional inside. They have very powerful empathy. Narcissists don't. They have cold empathy. The body language of autists and narcissists appears to be identical, but the psychodynamic etiology, the reason behind the body language, is totally different.
Okay.
Autists appear to be shy or arrogant because they fear pain and rejection. In this sense, they are much closer to avoidant personality disorder.
Okay.
Narcissists appear to be arrogant because they are arrogant, not because they fear pain and rejection, because they think they're much better than you, superior to you, and so on. At least in my case, it's true. Okay. So, I can't help it. Don't you understand? Can't help it.
It's a compulsion.
Compulsion, yeah. Viennese compulsion. The inner world of the autists is radically different to the inner world of the therapist. For example, autists are in no need of narcissistic supply. Autists are very sociable. They want to socialize. They want company. They want to have sex even. They want to. So they aspire to be normal, but they simply can't. They can't for a variety of reasons. Today we know that certain structures in the brain are affected and so on. So it's really a more biological problem than mental health problem.
Oh, okay.
But they can't. To start with, exactly like the narcissist, they misinterpret social cues. They disastrously misread body language, other people's body language. And that's true for the narcissist as well. The difference is that when they do that, they don't realize it, or if they do realize it, they react with withdrawal. They withdraw. When a narcissist does that, the narcissist will reframe the situation in terms of grandiosity. So, for example, if I misread your social cues and rejected by you, I would say, wow, this guy is seriously retarded. I mean, what an asshole. I would say, I would devalue you.
Yeah.
I would devalue you to maintain my superior grandiosity. So we say that autists have autoplastic defenses. In other words, autists would guilt trip themselves, would take the blame on themselves. Something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with me, that's why I'm being rejected. And narcissist says, alloplastic defenses. Narcissists would say, well, something wrong with them. That's why they're rejecting me. But both of them, of course, are socially utterly inept. Narcissists are focused around obtaining supply in order to support and buttress their grandiosity and to maintain a stable sense of self-worth. Autists have a stable sense of self-worth. They don't need external input. And indeed, the vast majority of autists are recluses and schizoid.
Yeah.
They stay home. They're kind of nerds. Many autists are in professions, solitary professions, like computer coding and so on, because they don't need supply. Narcissists are heavily dependent on supply for regulation. If they don't get supply for a prolonged period of time, they disintegrate. They go through a process called decompensation, which leads later to even psychosis, if the supply is missing for a very long time. I think these are the basic differences, but they're massive differences.
Yeah, huge.
I mean, there's emotion. Autist has emotional world, narcissist doesn't. Autist has empathy, narcissist doesn't. Autist doesn't need narcissistic supply, narcissist does. Autist is not arrogant and shy, on the very arrogant. On the very contrary, he's shy and believes there's something wrong with him. Narcissist is arrogant and believes something's wrong with everyone, etc., etc., etc. However, observing from the outside, and if you are only limited to observation, they appear identical.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate accident for people with autism that it plays out that way. Do you have any idea what are the you said it's more of a biological than a mental health issue. Any ideas at the moment in the research around what the main cause of autism might be?
No one at this stage really knows. But there is a trend in medicine, psychology. Many problems that used to be thought of as mental health problems, actually we are discovering that there are problems in a variety of totally bodily issues and functions. So there could be problems with neurotransmitters. There could be problems with brain structures, which is what we think now about autism. There could be problems with activity within brain structures. The brain structures are okay, but the activity there is somehow hampered. So, for example, psychopaths, they have extremely low activity in amygdala. And they can be problems of all three: biochemistry, structure, and activity. And that would be, for example, psychotic disorder.
Yeah.
So, and depression. So, big parts, not small parts, of what used to be thought of as psychology and so on is now considered utterly medical problem.
Yeah.
And this, of course, psychology is shrinking and disappearing, because bipolar used to be a major mainstay of psychology. It's no longer. Depression the same. Psychotic disorder the same. Paranoid schizophrenia. Autism disorders, and so on. And of course, psychiatrists have been fighting psychologists all since time immemorial, since I was a kid. And so, and psychiatrists are trying to medicalize everything. They say even what you call personality disorder is rubbish. It's probably an array of genes which malfunction together. Or it's probably some problem of inactivity in concerted parts of the brain. Or we are going to discover that it's actually a medical problem. There is no psychology. It's a major fight today. There is no psychology, say psychiatrists.
Yeah.
It's simply yet to be discovered medical problems. And psychologists are under siege. They feel increasingly as an endangered species. I would say that since the 1950s, about half of all psychological disorders have vanished and had become medical, pure medical problems, which we treat with pills and so on. Half. That's not a small number.
Yeah.
Not a small number.
Do you think the field of psychology has a part of the problem, apart from the medicalization and the medicalization of the solutions, is that it just has failed to prove itself particularly useful? There's not many people are out there saying, oh, psychology is wonderful, I had these problems and I saw a psychotherapist or I saw a counselor and I am better now. It's usually the opposite. They're usually complaining about the lack of help that they got.
It's because usually they come to me.
For re-traumatization.
Yes. And then I stop. I should continue, but I stop. The pleasure is to be. You have raised possibly unknowingly, a question that is more complex than it sounds.
Okay.
Because this entails a discussion of the connection between brain,
Yeah.
so-called psychological phenomena,
Yeah.
and treatments which seem to substantiate the medical hypothesis.
Yes.
And this is a hyper-complex issue.
Yeah.
So I just gave a whole year of lectures on insanity and these issues.
That's the annoying
But I'll
part.
try to-
You gave a year of it, and now you want to reduce it to 3 minutes. And
Yes.
that's the annoying element.
It actually was 3 minutes, but I sort of it was started with 3 minutes. But
Yeah.
let's really try to boil it down to the following statements.
Okay.
The mistake of psychiatrists, I think, is that they confuse correlation with causation and effect with cause.
Yes.
In other words, they say, if I give you a pill that reduces the reabsorption of serotonin, and then you feel much better, it means that
proves.
depression is a serotonin problem.
That's right, yeah.
Of course, it's utterly flawed logic. We cannot learn from effects about necessary causes. For example, the two phenomena, depression and serotonin regulation, may be connected to a third phenomenon about which we know nothing.
Yeah.
In other words, you can go from cause to effect, we know, because I'm a physicist by training.
Yeah.
In physics, I can go from cause to effect,
Yeah.
but never from effect to cause.
Yeah.
And this is one mistake which psychiatrists make. They say, listen, if I put electrodes in your brain, you feel joy. That's what it means. This is the... We don't know enough.
It's actually a logical fallacy, isn't it? It's a straight
Yes, it's a logical fallacy. We don't know enough about the brain. We know almost nothing about the brain. I mean, every neuroscientist will tell you that I'm talking nonsense. But that's because of the narcissism of the field.
Yeah.
This is an extremely arrogant field with hubris and nonsense, and we know nothing about the brain. About a few weeks ago, a whole mega structure in the brain was discovered. Weeks, not decades. A whole mega structure, an underlying system of channels which transported ions and so on, and reached every corner of the brain, from the reptile to the prefrontal cortex. So it was this enormous plumbing. No one knew about it until a few weeks ago.
Just now, yeah.
You know, so give me a break. We discovered a few years ago that 90% of serotonin is manufactured in the intestines, not in the brain. So what exactly is the role of serotonin?
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah.
And yet we've been giving people pills for 40 years, changing, altering the way serotonin is processed in the brain,
Yes.
not knowing that the bulk of it is produced in the intestines.
The logic that they've used, do you think it's fair to say it's actually quite a primitive logic? They've gone, well, there's the problem. Serotonin's the issue.
Nothing wrong with saying, if I give you this pill, you will blush.
Right.
Okay, I give you a pill, you blush.
Yes.
Very wrong to say that this proves that I know why you blush.
Right.
I know how the pill works.
Yes.
I know which areas of the brain it affects and
Yes.
so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And you blush.
Yeah.
But A and B can be anything.
Yeah.
A can lead to B. B could lead to A. Maybe your consciousness made you blush and affected the area in the brain.
Yes.
And there could be a C,
Yeah.
which is connected to A and B. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't learn from effect on causes.
Yeah.
It's the most basic deductive fallacy.
Yeah.
That's one thing that they routinely make. The second thing is that psychology can never be a science. There is no way on earth it can be a science, because science is very clearly defined. Science is a theory incorporating all the known facts and predicting new facts. These new facts are falsified, not verified, but falsified in experiments. The experiments must be conducted on the same subjects repetitively, repeatedly. These are the primal conditions of science. Literally, none of these conditions can be satisfied in psychology. For example, if I conduct an experiment on you, which would be an unmitigated pleasure, if I conduct an experiment on you, and then I conduct the same experiment 5 minutes from now, you are not the same subject. Experiments in psychology cannot be repeated.
Yeah.
So, never.
Yeah.
As a matter of principle. Not a question that I will secure the same room and the same lighting and the same.
Yeah.
Things happened in your brain these 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You saw Marian, you panicked.
Yeah.
You saw the coffee, you gagged. I mean,
Yeah.
million things happen. You're not the same person. Heraclitus, Pantarei, the river flows.
Yeah.
You're not the same. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that psychological theories do not generate enough hypotheses to be tested. We call it undergeneration of hypotheses. It's a problem with theories. Theories that don't generate enough hypotheses which are testable are considered bad theories that should be discarded. Literally all psychological theories are like that. I don't know of a single one which is not. They don't generate enough hypotheses. The only exception to some extent was behaviorism, to some extent. But behaviorism generated hypotheses about rats. And although the vast majority of humanity is easily comparable to rats, I mean, there's a sizable percentage, which is not. It's a bit of a problem, jumping from rats to human beings. But it was in the United States, so it may explain why. And am I being nasty enough?
More.
More. So psychology is not a science.
Yeah.
That's the second problem. So I said there are 3 legs.
Yeah.
And the third problem is that the brain is plastic, more plastic than we had thought. And that is a mistake of psychiatry, not psychology. Psychiatrists say, talk, should give a pill. They don't realize that talk therapy modifies the brain as much as any pill. If there's an visible effect on the brain, there are numerous functional magnetic resonance, fMRI studies that show when you talk to people, areas are activated, new neural pathways are formed, proteins are deposited for long-term memory. I mean, the brain is seriously, when you talk, you put your hand inside the other's brain and you mash it. Absolutely. And if the talk is structured with some principles and so on, the effect would be structural and discernible. So each of these disciplines makes a mistake.
Right.
These mistakes are cardinal. They're not minor mistakes. So the whole field is in a mess. Psychology is transitioning to psychiatry, and psychiatry is transitioning to neuroscience.
Right.
And in each junction, there is a catastrophic mistake underlying the whole transition. In each of the 3. The 3 mistakes that I just mentioned.
Right.
Consequently, I'm extremely pessimistic about the future of our understanding of humans, their psychology, their behavior, their traits. Extremely pessimistic. Of course, we don't know anything now. We don't know anything now. We have a list. It's very similar. What we have today is exactly like I would make a list of all the records of the Beatles, and I would claim that I know the music.
Right.
Never having listened to them.
Yes, you just read the list.
I just read the
There's
list.
the list.
Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club, and I know the Beatles. But I never heard a note of the Beatles.
And is this...
And this list, by the way, is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Right. And is this a symptomatic of the way modern academia is, where we just go, we have the list, we know. I used to tell people, people would say to me when I was teaching self-defense, I know boxing. And what they meant was they could recognize the sport of boxing being played out when they saw it on TV. They didn't know how to throw a jab or a right hook. They couldn't.
How does it feel?
How does it feel? They had no multi-dimensional proprioceptive idea of what it was. They just see it.
And that's what Freud called insight. They had no insight into the phase of making lists is a puerile phase of science, of any science. So biology, for example, modern biology started with Carlos Linnaeus. Carlos Linnaeus went around and made lists of plants, lists of animals, and that's the Linnean system of taxonomy, Linnean system of classification of plants and animals. But that was 300 years ago. I mean, the time has passed. So today biology is not concerned with lists of animals and lists of plants. There's still this branch of classification. It's called taxonomy. Still this branch, but it's not, it's so same happened in, let's say, physics. When we started with physics, we were making lists. I remember even I remember, and this I'm serious, it's on dinosaurs. I remember the time that we were so excited, we were making lists of elementary particles.
Right.
We said electrons, oh, there's also protons, oh, there's also neutrons, oh, neutrino, oh, we were so excited.
Yeah.
Every day we were adding something to the list. But of course, it didn't mean anything. It was just a list.
Yeah.
But today, of course, physics has the particle model of physics. And, theory. I mean, yes, you have to make lists, but that's when you are 4 years old. After that, you grow up, you become adult, you know.
Yeah.
And psychology and psychiatry never passed this stage. I blame money and American influence.
Really?
Yes, because what happened is psychologists and psychiatrists discovered there's money, a lot of money. Exactly, it's same thing exactly happened with narcissism. When I started with narcissism, for the first 9 years, I made everything free and so on. No one was interested. Then one genius discovered that she can make money. I know who, by the way.
Okay.
Discovered that she can make money. She was the first to charge. None of us were charging. I had like people who were working with me. None of us were charging. We had the first support group was 250,000 members, and that was the beginning of the internet, 1999. There was no internet, and there were 250,000. We never charged. We worked like slaves, 10 hours a day. We never charged a penny. Then a woman came, never mind her name, and she charged. She was the first to charge. We were shocked, I remember. It was like athletic sport, amateur sport, and
yes.
we were shocked.
Yeah.
She was the first to charge. And then the doors opened, the gates opened.
Right.
And everyone and his dog became expert on narcissism, narcissistic abuse, this, that, because they can all charge.
Yeah.
Same happened in psychology. For a very long time, you couldn't charge. Because until the 1940s, therapy was not a serious business. Psychoanalysts were charging money, but everyone agreed that psychoanalysis is a form of literature,
Right.
not real science.
Yeah.
And you came to talk to your psychoanalyst because he was good looking. I mean, no one expected really any recovery or healing. And a typical time span of psychoanalysis was 29 years, and so everything was okay. You didn't expect any results before the 27th year.
Right.
And so on. And so it was not therapy as we know it today. Today people come to therapy and they expect results. There's a time horizon, there's alliance, it was totally different. But then in the 1950s with Gestalt, people begin to discover that there's money, serious money.
Yeah.
So there was an influx of therapies, new methods, new systems, new behavioral therapy, emotive behavioral therapy. I mean, you name it. It was a proliferation, explosion of types of therapy. Everyone was making money like crazy and so on. But the big money was in the health system.
Right.
I wanted to become part of the health system, but how to do that? There was no agreement on diagnostic categories. I mean, how can you get reimbursed? If I treat tuberculosis, tuberculosis is tuberculosis is tuberculosis. In Ghana, in Macedonia, in the United Kingdom, in the United States, in Israel, in Russia. Everywhere is tuberculosis. A Russian doctor can charge in Israel for treating tuberculosis.
Yeah.
There's a price list.
Yeah.
What do you do with neurosis? What on earth is neurosis? I mean, what's that?
Yeah.
How do you test for it? How do you... So what they did, two things. First of all, they came up in conjunction with insurance companies. I'm kidding you not. They worked with insurance companies, and they came up with a manual, a codification manual. The manual had numbers. So now you could fill up an insurance form and write that the patient's diagnosis is 736.1, and the insurance can process your claim. That's how the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual was created. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't
It was
know.
an insurance manual.
I didn't know that I knew that the insurance people were involved. I didn't know it was created so that you could claim
Solely for
medical
that.
insurance.
Solely for that. So now psychiatrists and psychologists got integrated into the health system. And it was a nice first step. But the manual was 100 pages. There wasn't enough for everyone.
Yeah.
So they quintupled it. And then they quintupled the quintuple. And today the manual is 900 pages
Right.
from 100.
Bloody hell.
Show me a single medical manual in this time span that went from 100 to 800 or 900. I don't know one. I mean, we discovered many things. We discovered new types of cancer. And new types. I mean, there was AIDS and Ebola, which didn't exist.
Yeah.
But, for example, if you take Harrison's internal medicine, it went up by 20-30%. It's typical for medical books to grow by 20-30%.
Right.
But that's it.
Yeah.
the manual of alleged psychiatric disorders, ostensible, went from 100 to 900. Are we 9 times more sick?
Yeah. Yeah, that's insane.
And they are medicalizing and pathologizing behaviors that should never ever be medicalized and pathologized. Do you know that there is a disorder called defiant oppositional disorder?
For naughty children.
Oppositional defiant disorder.
Oppositional defiance.
ODD. These are children that don't respect the principal at school. I am kidding you not.
That's literally how it's diagnosed.
That's the criteria. Do not respect authority figures in school. I am not kidding you.
What can you give them for that, then?
I'm sorry?
What, is there a drug you can give them, or is it
Of course, you can give them Ritalin, and they need talk therapy, and the insurance covers it. It's in the diagnostic and statistical manual. It's agreed.
Right.
And so on. It's a whole industry. So oppositional defiant disorder.
Right.
Antisocial personality disorder. Why antisocial personality disorder? Personality is a disorder.
Yeah.
If I despise society, hate policemen, and break every rule of the book, why does that make me mentally sick?
Right.
It makes me perhaps obnoxious.
Yeah.
It definitely makes me
criminal.
a criminal.
Yeah.
But why does it make me
Yeah.
mentally sick?
Yes. Yeah.
And to some extent, you could ask, if I'm an asshole, I'm insensitive to other people, I give a shit about other people, I exploit them, abuse them, and so why does that make me mentally sick?
Yeah.
Why does that make me a narcissist?
Yeah.
These are all labels that are heavily disputed.
Yeah.
If I'm a woman who likes to show off my body and fuck, why does that make me histrionic personality disorder? You know, they took now new things, caffeine addiction, internet addiction. Internet addiction is now officially in the DSM.
Is it really? Internet
Yes,
addiction?
It's really.
Cool.
I mean, so it's a problem. This proliferation.
Because they're being rewarded for creating.
Yes, the minute you create a new
reinforcement.
diagnostic, so there are textbooks,
Yeah.
medicines,
Yeah.
insurance claims, talk therapy, a
Money,
whole
money,
generation of
money.
kids that can be pathologized.
Yeah.
I mean, wonderful.
Yeah.
Look at the diagnosis of ADHD. A problem with attention span, a problem with what is hyperactivity? Who decides if it's hyper? I mean, what's this?
Yeah.
Hyper, by definition, is a value judgment. It's an opinion.
Yeah.
No opinion can ever be a clinical category, ever.
Yeah.
How can you call, imagine I tell you, hyper, your lungs are hyper. What on earth is this?
Yeah.
Your lungs are too big. What's
Yeah.
that? I mean, it's mind-boggling. What's it?
I suppose that points straight to the pathologizing of they're too big by whose standards? By my standards, by the standards of the parents, by the standards of the school. We can't be arsed dealing with naughty children, so they're hyper. It's too much.
Too much for us.
For us.
Too much for us. They're too much for us. They don't have enough attention span. What do you mean? Attention span for what? For a Twitter? For a tweet? For a book? Which book, by the way?
Yeah.
War and Peace? I mean,
I actually worked in the British education system, and I worked with a guy who had been told he had ADHD and was dyslexic. And he said, I can't read textbooks. I said, that's interesting. Is there anything you can read? He said, oh yeah, FHM. Are the words clear to you when you read FHM and you're reading about cars and beautiful supermodels? Yeah, they're clear. What happens in this physics book? It's murky. You mean you're bored? Well, and that's pathologized. He has well, as far as he's concerned, it's a biological illness, the same as anything else, as far as he's concerned.
Let me shock you. Boredom, being bored, is a diagnostic criteria in quite a few mental disorders.
Really?
Really. Including psychopathy. Read the criteria of antisocial personality disorder and the text that follows in the DSM. And one of the main things is that easily bored.
So would you, we're drifting a little bit, I'm aware, would you abandon some of these definitions?
Absolutely.
Do you think
There's a group of disorders that have a biochemical, neurological, and biological correlate. I'm very careful, I'm not saying cause, but correlates. So that allows us for some way to diagnose them, because when we see the correlate, we can safely assume that's one thing. And these should be treated with medication and mostly with a medical approach. Although they can benefit from talk therapy, but I would think that the talk therapy has to be treated as a pill. It has to be extremely structured, like push button, not really, you know, all over the place, but highly specific. There's one group of disorders, and another group of disorders which it has to be acknowledged are social disorders. So I would definitely recognize social dysfunctions, but I would be honest about it. It's not a problem of the person, it's a problem of society. And now society has a perfect right to defend itself against criminals.